Hi guys, quite a few of you have told me that you were interested in a tutorial on a rabbit. So today I've painted this watercolour bunny and I'll show you how I did it. Before we start, make sure you hit that subscribe button and ring that little bell so that you'll get notified every time I publish a new video. I just want to let you know that I've opened a Patreon account. I'll tell you more about this at the end of the video. Now I've condensed the content of this rabbit tutorial for YouTube. The complete tutorial goes for about 1 hour on Patreon. Alright, so let's get started. And as always, all of the paints and the brushes that I used are listed in the description. This is the reference photo that I'll be using. I downloaded this from Wildlife Reference Photos. So I'm using my Casaneo brush to paint a wash of water on the body of the rabbit. So I'm just starting up near the neck and I'm just going to wash in the whole body in one go. I want a fair amount of water on the paper because it'll dry before I get to it if I don't put a fair amount there. And then I'm going to use some of the brown ochre first. So just mix some water into it. I don't want it too diluted, but I don't want it too thick either. So I just want it to be a nice strong colour over the top of the damp paper. So I just paint it on like this until I've got most of the body covered. So now I've got some Winsor Violet and I just drop that in here and there just onto the wet brown ochre paint. Put some down here at the base too, just to darken the colour down here a little bit. And then I use my Maestro brush and I go along and I just do some flicks onto the dry paper just to get some hair flicks down onto those dry parts where there's no water. So I have switched down to a smaller brush to do this. This is the Maestro brush. Okay, now so when I'm happy with my layer of paint, I want to start putting some salt on, and I've got to do that before the paper dries. I have posted a video on YouTube about applying salt to watercolour, and it's a really good one. If you don't know exactly what to do, I suggest you go and have a look at that one. So I'm just placing the coarse sea salt onto the damp paint so the paint is still slightly wet. It's got a slight sheen to it still. If it was too dry, nothing would happen. And if it's too wet, again, nothing really happens with this salt. So you've just got to get the timing right. So I have to leave that to dry now. And this is what I'm left with. So I've got some beautiful texture happening there. So now that it's dry, I just take off all the salt crystals. Now I want to start painting the head, and I'm just putting a layer of water over the top first. So now I've got some brown ochre on my brush and I just paint that onto the damp paper just like I did on the body. And I just leave a few areas of white paper showing. So now I'm going to put some Winsor Violet onto the head. And I just paint that violet just onto the damp paper. So the brown ochre is still slightly damp. So I just look on the reference photo where the fur is a little bit darker, and then I'm just putting the Winsor Violet there. So now I've got some sepia on my brush. And I'm just putting the darker areas down near the nose. And then I can take some flicks off the top of the head as well. So now I want to start painting this back ear. So I just paint some water on it. Just using my Maestro brush. And then when I've got water all over it, I can pick up some of the brown ochre. And I just paint that onto the damp paper. Now I need a grey colour, so I'm going to mix the ultramarine blue with the burnt sienna just to make a nice soft grey. And then that goes on the top of the ear. And I run it along the edge of the other one. So I've just done the same thing on the outside of this other ear. And now I'm just wetting the inside part of the ear with some water. Now this colour is a mix of permanent rose and brown ochre. I paint it carefully around the hairs there. And once I get past the hairs, then I can just put it on a bit quicker. Now I've got some Winsor violet, and I'm just deepening the colour down near the little inner hairs of the ear. And I just push it out a little bit further as well. Now I've got some of the grey mix on my brush, and I'm just going to run it along that outer edge. And then it'll just softly bleed into the ear because of the water on the paper. I've gone ahead and I've painted the eye and the area around the eye, and all that I've missed is included in my Patreon class. Now I've just put some water on the nose area. So now I can paint on those dark markings where the whiskers come out. So this is just with my liner brush and sepia on damp paper. So now I'm just deepening the colour underneath the neck area, and I'm just using sepia on damp paper here. So I've gone ahead and I've painted the front paw just with some brown ochre, and now I'm deepening the colour on the lower half of the paw with more pigment on my brush. I'm just painting onto the damp paper. Now I've jumped ahead and I've painted a wash on the back of the body. I've put some detail onto the white part of the fur on the front of the leg there. And now I'm just deepening the colour on the side of the leg and also on the base here. So everything that I've missed, plus a lot more, is included in my Patreon class. So at the moment, I'm pushing sepia up onto the damp paper. And I'm also pulling the sepia down onto the dry paper just to create some hair there as well. Now I've just painted the foot with some brown ochre, and now I'm putting some sepia along the bottom with my liner brush. I'm just painting onto the damp paint here. So this is watery sepia, and I'm just painting over the damp brown ochre. So I'm painting wet on wet at the moment. So I've jumped ahead and I've done quite a bit more on the rabbit. Now I've got some Winsor Newton white ink, and I'm just painting the whiskers in with my liner brush. There's no water mixed in with the ink, it's just my damp brush just straight into the pot of ink. And now this gives me the opportunity of just creating a bit more hair along the edges of some of the different parts of the rabbit. If you decide to do this, it's a good idea not to overdo it. Just sort of strategically place some hair here and there. Just don't paint it everywhere. I've prefer to use the white ink over white gouache because I find it covers better. I find when I use the white gouache, I've got to keep going over it and over it and over it until I get the depth of colour that I want. So this is quicker. So I put some up in the ear as well. Some over here. So it's just, as I said, just important not to overdo it. So now I've got some sepia on my brush and I'm just extending those whiskers. So when the white ink went on the white paper, you couldn't see it. And there's my finished painting. I hope you enjoyed that. I mentioned at the start of the video that I've opened an account on Patreon. I'm going to provide my patrons with full-length voiced-over tutorials. They'll have access to my line drawings and my reference photos if I'm using my own reference photo, or links to where I downloaded them from if I'm not. My plan at this stage is to post at least one full tutorial there each month. I'll also be posting behind the scenes photos and I'll be sharing lots of hints and tips. My goal is to build a community there where I can share my knowledge with you and we can grow and support one another on our painting journeys. There's a link to my page in the description below if you want to know more. Don't forget to like this video if you found it useful and share it with your painting friends. Thank you again for watching and I'll see you in the next video.